Today's topic is the question of, does wisdom come with age? And then we have to ask ourselves, what is wisdom and what is knowledge? The primary difference between knowledge and wisdom is that wisdom involves a healthy dose of perspective, ability to make sound judgments about a subject, while knowledge is simply knowing. There's a familiar quote to show the difference between the two. Knowledge is knowing what to say, wisdom is knowing when to say it. And another quote is, a wise person keeps his lips sealed until he knows what to say, to whom, where, when, and how. So knowledge is acquaintance with facts, truths, principles. You acquire knowledge by studying, by investigating, by listening to lectures, by surfing the internet, and so on and so forth. Wisdom is defined as the state of being wise, which means having the power of discernment and judging properly as to what is right and what is wrong. Wisdom takes knowledge and applies it with discernment based on experience, evaluation, and lessons learned. To put it another way, knowledge is knowing the tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to use it in making a fruit salad with peaches, pears, and pineapples. There are other quotes on wisdom too. There's a very beautiful prayer called Serenity Prayer, which many of you might have heard. And Serenity Prayer goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference between the two. So wisdom appears in a number of different places. There's an old Chinese saying, or it could be Arabic origin. I don't know exactly the origin. It goes like this: he who knows and knows that he knows is a wise man. Follow him. So a wise man knows what he knows. And the opposite of that is, he who knows not and knows not that he knows not is a fool. Avoid him. I would also add, not only to avoid, but be very, very careful of such people. One who does not know and does not even know that he does not know. You have to be very careful. And the category of all these are politicians or anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, who have no business talking about medical issues, but they do anyway. And so that proverb also applies to them. And William Edward Norris, he is a journalist, he said it very well. If your lips would keep from slips, 5 things observe with care: of whom you speak, to whom you speak, and how and when and where. So that's William Norris. Now, coming back to today's topic, this occurs in Mahabharata, Vanaparva, and Lomasha was a rishi. He was explaining the history of several pilgrimages to Yudhishthira. He points to a hermitage and says that this hermitage belongs to Maharshi Shvetaketu, son of Uddalaka. Uddalaka, of course, is a famous sage. The rishi was known for his knowledge of the hymns. He once encountered goddess Saraswati, who had assumed a human form. He said, "Devi, grant me the boon to be a great orator and know the divine voice." Saraswati said, "So be it." Shvetaketu and Ashtavakra is the son of Maharshi Kadoha. But they were very good friends. Besides, Shvetaketu was the uncle of Ashtavakra, and I will tell you why. Both of them were very knowledgeable in scriptures and were deeply rooted in proper conduct, even at very, very young age. They once went to place of King Janaka and soundly defeated a learned man by name of Vandi in a spirited debate. Lomasha suggests, Yudhishthira, you should go into the hermitage and meet the great Ashtavakra. Yudhishthira said, please tell me more about Ashtavakra. How knowledgeable is he? How is it possible for him to defeat Vandi in a debate? Why was he born with 8 twists, Ashtavakra, 8 twists in his body? Tell me all of those in detail. Then Lomasha says, Yudhishthira, Uddalaka had a student by the name of Kadoha. Kadoha had complete mastery over the senses and was serving his teacher with sincerity. He remained as a student of Uddalaka for several years. Pleased with the service rendered to him, Uddalaka gave his daughter Sujata in marriage to Kadoha. He taught Kadoha all the sciences. In course of time, Sujata got pregnant. One day, the child was still in the womb of Sujata, and it addressed the father Kadoha thus, Sarvam Ratri Madhyayanam Karoti, Nedam Pitaha Samagnipo Pavartate. Oh, father, you are studying the Vedas all through the night, but I don't think that you are studying it in the proper manner, meaning you are not pronouncing certain things correctly. Though I am still in the womb, I am already knowledgeable in the Vedas and sciences. Kadoha was not pleased at the impudence of the embryo speaking to him thus. He became very angry and cursed the child in the mother's womb. Kadoha curses him. You are still in the womb, and yet you are pointing out the defects in others. I curse you to be born with 8 twists in your body. So Ashtavakra, how he got 8 twists in his body. As per the curse, the child was born with 8 twists in his body, and he was known as Ashtavakra, one with 8 twists. As was said before, Uddalaka had a son by the name of Shvetaketu. Shvetaketu, of course, is the uncle of Ashtavakra. He was of the same age. Both of them were the same ages. Lomasha narrates an incident that happened before Ashtavakra was born. Yudhishthira, Ashtavakra was not yet born. Sujata was 9 months pregnant. Kadoha was so preoccupied with the scriptural studies, he did not make any attempt to gather some wealth. Sujata once asked her husband, "Oh, master, I am approaching the 10th month of my pregnancy. After the child is born, we need to perform the naming ceremony, cast a horoscope. Don't you think we need some money to do all of these things? How can I cope with the fact that we have no money?" Only the king can provide the needed resources. After listening to Sujata, Kadoha went to see King Janaka. And King Janaka had a great debater by name of Vandi. He was a master logician. He was an excellent debater. Vandi was very expert in logic. Kadoha challenged him for a debate, and Kadoha could not win. He lost. Vandi got Kadoha's arms and legs tied up and then dumped him in a river. Uddalaka found out about what happened to his son-in-law. He called his daughter and told her about what happened to Kadoha and warned her, "Do not tell this to the child who is not yet born." Sujata agreed and did not tell anyone about the fate of her husband. Ashtavakra thus had no knowledge about what happened to his father for several years. He had come to believe Uddalaka was his real father, and Shvetaketu was his brother. Ashtavakra reached the age of 12. He was, as usual, sitting on Uddalaka's lap and was discussing the meaning of some scriptural writings. It so happened, Shvetaketu did not like Ashtavakra sitting on his father's lap. He at once grabbed Ashtavakra's shoulder and pulled him down. Ashtavakra began to cry. Shvetaketu then sat on Uddalaka's lap and said, "Ashtavakra, this lap is my father's lap, not your father's lap. You have no right to sit on my father's lap." Ashtavakra did not know anything about his father. He had always assumed Uddalaka was his father and Shvetaketu was his brother. Shattered at what he had heard, he ran to his mother crying and asked, "Oh, mother, where is my father? Where is my father?" Sujata was very upset, very grief-stricken. She was afraid that her son might get angry if he knows the truth. She then told him the story anyway. Ashtavakra sighed with relief and went to see his uncle Shvetaketu and said, "I have heard that King Janaka is performing a very great yajna. I have a great desire to go and see it. Let us both go tomorrow to King Janaka's place. Let us listen carefully to the great debate of learned Brahmins. Let us also enjoy the delicious food that is always served in the king's palace. By listening to this debate, our knowledge will improve. We can become wise." Shvetaketu agreed, and Ashtavakra and Shvetaketu started out to King Janaka's palace the next morning. As they were entering the royal hall, King Janaka was also going in. The royal servants ordered Ashtavakra to give the right way to the king. Ashtavakra did not take kindly to the order and started to lecture King Janaka. "O Maharaja, one should give the right of way for a blind person and show him the path. One should give the right of way for the deaf. So should one should give the right of way to a woman and the one carrying a heavy load on his head. If one encounters the king in front, he should show respect to the king and give the right of way. But if the king encounters a Brahmin in front, the king must cede the right of way to the Brahmin." Janaka said, "Oh, best among Brahmins, what you say is true. I will cede the right of way to you. You may go ahead of me and feel free to go anywhere you want to. Fire makes no distinction between a small log and a big log. Even Indra salutes the Brahmins daily." Ashtavakra said, "O king, we have come here to see the great yajna of yours. We are very anxious to see it. We have also the desire to talk to you, but the doorkeeper will not let us in. We are very angry." The doorkeeper heard the accusation against him and decided to respond to Ashtavakra directly. "Hey, you young Brahmin boy, we are guarding the entrance upon the order of great orator Vandi. Listen patiently to what I have to say. Do not get angry. I want you to know the young boys are not allowed in this meeting hall. Only elderly Brahmins endowed with wisdom are allowed inside. Meaning, you're very young, you don't have any wisdom." Ashtavakra said, "Doorkeeper, we may be young, but we have equal rights to enter the assembly. We may be young in physical age, but we might not look very old, but our knowledge is very deep. We are very proficient in the scriptures, even though we are young. We have mastery over our senses. We have served our teachers well. We are well versed in Jnana Yagna. Just because we look young, you should not neglect us and be indifferent to us. Doesn't even a tiny spark burn your finger if you touch it?" The doorkeeper was a great scholar. He said, "Oh friend, you say that you have studied the Vedas. If so, tell me the one word that captures the essence of all Vedas. Don't you forget that you are still a youngster. It is no use boasting about your prowess in the Vedas. It is difficult indeed to meet a real scholar in this world." Ashtavakra then says, the one word that captures the essence of Vedas is Om. Jaya Shiva Omkara, Jaya Jaya Bhaja Shiva Omkara, Om Brahma Vishnu Sada Shivaya, Hara 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 Mahadeva. So Om is a sacred symbol that captures the essence of all the Vedas. Ashtavakara continues, mere physical age does not guarantee wisdom. There may be a very big tree with lot of tasteless fruits, and people ignore it. People prefer a tree, though small, but bearing tasty fruits. The formal tree grows old and dies, and no one will shed a tear for its demise. But people worship the small tree with tasty fruits and take good care of it. Wisdom does not come automatically with age. The doorkeeper said, "You young Brahmin, let me tell you the tradition in this world. Youngsters learn from grown-ups only. As the youngsters age, they will in turn teach other youngsters. No one can gain knowledge in very few years. It takes time and deep study over several years. This being the accepted tradition, how dare you talk like an experienced elder?" Ashtavakra said, "Just because the hair turns gray, it does not mean that his knowledge is mature and he is wise. If a youngster is knowledgeable, even the celestials will say that he has maturity of knowledge. The rishis do not determine the value, the importance, significance of a person by his wealth, gray hair, or his rich relatives. They look to the oratorial skills and the knowledge of the Vedas he possesses. I have come here to listen to the oratorial skills of Vandi. Go tell the king about my arrival. You will see for yourself my debate with the learned scholars. I will engage Vandi in a debate and will defeat him. Let the assembly decide my capability." The doorkeeper agreed to help Ashtavakra gain entrance into the hall, and he also told him to talk to the king himself in order to proceed further. Ashtavakra then turned to King Janaka and said, "Oh, the excellent among kings, you are indeed the emperor of a great kingdom. You possess enormous wealth. You are known for the great yajnas that you perform. We have heard about it and have come here to see for ourselves. We have heard that Vandi throws the vanquished into the river. Do tell us where that Vandi is. Just as the rising sun destroys the twinkling of the stars, I will defeat Vandi in a debate and destroy his arrogance. I will destroy his ill-gotten influence with you." Janaka said, "Oh, young man, you are perhaps unaware of the great oratorial skills of Vandi. You are anxious to defeat him. If you knew his skills, you would not challenge him. Several learned men, knowing Vandi's skills, have challenged him and have lost in the debate. You don't know much about Vandi's oratorial skills and logical arguments. Maybe this is why you're bragging. Think carefully before you throw a challenge. It seems to me that you're making a big mistake." Ashtavakra says, "Maharaja, Vandi has never met anyone like me before. He has not met his challenge yet. That's why he thinks too much of himself and roars like a lion. When he meets me in a debate, I can assure you that he will fall just as a cart would fall if it had lost one of its wheels." The king was not convinced of Ashtavakra's statements. He was doubtful of Ashtavakra's knowledge and wisdom. He wanted to test him and posed several questions in the form of riddles. Many of these questions remind me of the Yaksha Prashna. One of the questions he has is, what does not close its eyes when it is asleep? What does not move when it is born? What is swifter than a flowing river? Ashtavakra says the fish does not close its eyes when it is asleep. The egg does not move when it is born. The mind is swifter than the flowing river. There are hidden meanings in all of that, but Ashtavakra was able to answer all of the riddles that King Janaka posed to him. And Ashtavakra answered all of them, and King Janaka was satisfied. And then he said, "Okay, I give you permission. You can go ahead and face Vandi in a great debate." Ashtavakra needles Vandi by saying, "I will vanquish you and I'll humiliate you." Vandi responds, "Don't try to wake up a sleeping tiger. Do not step on a poisonous serpent. "You arrogant kid, do you know what happens if you try to strike a big mountain? Let me tell you, you'll break your hands and feel the pain while the mountain stays the same." The great debate began, and both Vandi and Ashtavakra posed deep philosophical questions to each other. In the end, it was Ashtavakra who triumphed, and Vandi admitted defeat. Ashtavakra reminded the king that Vandi would throw the vanquished into the river, and now that Vandi is the loser, he should meet the same fate. Vandi reminds the assembly that he is the son of Varuna, the rain god, and that he could not be drowned in a river. He also assures Ashtavakra that his father Kadoha will return from the river. Soon after, Kadoha appears and blesses all the people in the assembly. He blesses King Janaka with health, wealth, and prosperity. He then returned to his hermitage with Ashtavakra. Seeing them, Sujata was overjoyed. Kadoha then asked Ashtavakra to go and bathe in the holy river that was near the hermitage. When Ashtavakra took the bath, all of his 8 deformities disappeared and he emerged as a handsome young boy. Since his crooked limbs, Anga, were straightened, that particular river is today known as Ananga. Ananga means one which has no crookedness. So that is the Ashtavakra story, which Lomasha was relating to Yudhishthira. And the interesting part of the story is the debate between Vandi and Ashtavakra. And the only problem is the debate is extremely cryptic, very difficult to understand. And let me just give you a few ideas on what the debate went on. The actual debate was a game of numbers. Vandi takes the odd numbers and Ashtavakra takes the even numbers. Both using these numbers string together diverse and apparently unrelated topics, uniting them under the group of 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Although the superficial meaning seems completely random and just a word jugglery of numbers and objects, there's an inner meaning for each of those sentences which reveals the true debate. So Vandi takes the numbers, odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. Ashtavakra, the even numbers, 2, 4, 6, etc. According to the inner meaning, Vandi, using the odd numbers, takes the position of the philosophy called Bheda Abheda, system of Vedanta. He argues there's only the individual self, and all actions ought to be directed to the supreme goal is to realize this self. Ashtavakra takes the position of Advaita Vedanta and proves the two entities, not just one. There's an individual self and the supreme Brahman, who is the controller of the inner self. He maintains that all actions are directed to realization of the Brahman, the inner controller. Therefore, the debate begins with Ashtavakra and Vandi each stating their position using the number 1 and 2 respectively. Following this, the remaining numbers are used by them to debate and argue their position, with Ashtavakra emerging victorious at the count of 13. So each of these debaters would compose a verse of 4 lines, and after Vandi said the 4 lines, Ashtavakra would respond with 4 lines pertaining to number 2. Then Vandi would respond with 4 lines pertaining to number 3. And Ashtavakra would respond with 4 lines pertaining to number 4, etc. Until they came to verse 13. Vandi could only the first 2 lines. He did not know how to complete the next 2 lines. Ashtavakra steps in and completes the next 2 lines, and therefore Vandi accepts that he is defeated by Ashtavakra, and everybody congratulates him. That's an interesting story. I have not studied that debate questions. I have the translations of those. It took me a long while to translate them. They're very, very cryptic, but I don't have the inner meaning or the hidden meaning of those things, except I have a vague idea, but not a thorough grasp of what the debate was. And that's the reason why I'm skipping that, even though that probably is one of the more important things in Ashtavakra's story. So that is how the story starts with Lomasha and ends with Ashtavakra regaining his original form, a beautiful young boy. And Ashtavakra is the one who makes the statement that age does not necessarily mean one is wise. So that's the essence of what today's talk is all about. There's one more story I want to tell you, because Mahabharata reveals a whole lot of things that I never knew. And this is a very interesting story regarding Jamadagni. Jamadagni is one of the great Saptarshis. His wife's name was Renuka. And Jamadagni had a great fascination for archery. So he would take one bow from his quiver and string the bow and shoot at the target. Another bow, shoot at the target. Another arrow, shoot at the target. He was so fast, it would almost seem like there was an endless line of arrows going from his bow to the target. And he would ask his wife Renuka, please go and fetch all the arrows from the target so I can start practicing again. Very much like in a golf course where you practice hitting the balls, but there a machine retrieves all the balls and brings them back, and no Renuka. So Renuka would go fetch all the arrows. One day, the sun was extremely hot. So her head was splitting very hot, and her feet were full of calluses and burns because the ground was very hot. So she sat under a tree, took some rest, and then after resting herself, she went and fetched all the arrows back. Jamadagni was not very pleased. Why did it take so long for you to bring all the arrows? I've been waiting and waiting and waiting. Renuka said, oh Lord, the sun was extremely hot. My head was splitting with pain. My feet was very painful because the ground was so hot. So I sat under a tree to take rest, rejuvenate myself, and then go get the arrow. That's why I'm late. Ashtavakra said, oh, the sun made you late. I will teach the sun a lesson. So he took an arrow from his quiver, aimed the arrow at the sun in order to shut the sun up. At the same time, a young Brahmin approaches Jamadagni. The young Brahmin is sun himself, disguised as a Brahmin. And he says, oh, great sage, why are you so angry at the sun? The sun is very useful. The sun is the one that brings us rain. Rain brings us food. Food nourishes the plants. Food nourishes all the people. If there is no rain, then people will die and the civilization will cease to exist. So please do not get mad at the sun. That is its nature. The sun shines, the sun sets, the sun produces rain, and it is very useful. So please do not get mad at the sun. Jamadagni intuits that the Brahmin was none other than the sun. And so he says, I know who you are sun, the god sun. Okay, I will let you do what you normally do, but there must be something you do to protect the people from being tortured from head to toe. Then sun produces an umbrella and a pair of sandals. Padaraksha is called. Sandals is Padaraksha, protector of the pada is feet, and an umbrella. And he gives them to Jamadagni and tells him, if in all the religious ceremonies, if the host presents gifts, a pair of sandals and an umbrella to the people who attend, he will attain great prosperity. And that tradition continues, at least in South India. During the wedding, the groom goes on what is called Kashi Yatra. He suddenly decides, that he does not want to get married. He wants to go to Kashi and remain as a bachelor. And the bride's uncle comes around and pleads with him, please do not go to Kashi. Come and marry, and please do not go. And then he holds an umbrella on top of his head, and he gives him a pair of sandals to wear. This is how the umbrellas and sandals came into being through the story of Jamadagni. I didn't know that. So when reading Mahabharata, when I saw the story, I was quite amused that it originated from that particular era. Okay, I'll stop here.